What if I told you that the more you beg a narcissist for an apology, the less likely you are to ever get one? The very thing you think will finally make them say, "I'm sorry," is usually the exact thing that pushes them even further away from taking responsibility. But here's the truth you need to hear. When you do one specific thing, something most people are scared to do, a narcissist can suddenly feel real pressure to apologize. And yes, it actually works. Before we go deeper, if you've ever dealt with someone who flat out refuses to own the fact that they hurt you, hit like on this video and subscribe. This channel is about helping you see these patterns clearly so you can protect your peace and your power. One of the most important things to understand about narcissistic behavior is that real apologies are extremely rare. And the reason has almost nothing to do with you and almost everything to do with their fragile inner world. For most people, an apology is just an act of taking responsibility. It means you see that you hurt someone and you're willing to own it. But for a narcissistic person, an apology feels like something much more threatening. It feels like admitting weakness, imperfection, or a loss of control. Their self-image is built on the belief that they must look superior, flawless, and always right in what they do. When someone asks them to apologize, it challenges that carefully built identity. Because of this, the narcissistic mind quickly flips into defense mode. Instead of thinking honestly about what they did, they start protecting their ego. That protection can show up in a lot of ways. They might deny what happened, play down the hurt they caused, push the blame back onto you, or completely rewrite the story so they look like the victim. In many cases, they truly convince themselves they did nothing wrong because admitting the truth would force them to face feelings of shame they simply cannot handle. Another reason apologies feel dangerous to them is because responsibility threatens their sense of control. If they admit they hurt you, they feel like they're losing the upper hand in the situation. Narcissists often see relationships through the lens of power, not mutual care. An apology in their mind can feel like surrendering that power. This is why begging, arguing, or asking over and over for an apology almost never works. The more you push them to admit fault, the more their defenses rise, and the further they run from real responsibility. Another key pattern in relationships with narcissists is the way emotional reactions work. Narcissists depend heavily on what psychologists call emotional supply, the energy they get from other people's reactions. And this supply is not just praise or admiration. Very often, your frustration, anger, pleading, or emotional pain can give them just as much fuel. When someone reacts strongly to them, it proves they still have influence and control over that person's emotional state. When a narcissist hurts someone and that person responds with intense emotion, the narcissist may see that reaction very differently than a healthy person would. Instead of seeing the pain they caused and feeling empathy, they may see your reaction as proof that they still have a powerful place in your life. The more you explain your hurt, argue your point, or demand fairness, the more attention and emotional energy the narcissist gets. That attention keeps the pattern going. Over time, this turns into a cycle where the narcissist provokes, dismisses, or minimizes the harm, and the other person reacts by trying even harder to be heard. Sadly, those efforts usually make the very behavior you hate even stronger. The narcissist gets used to all that emotional engagement and starts to expect it. This is why so many people feel stuck in endless conversations, repeating their feelings again and again with zero real change. The narcissist is not truly looking for resolution or understanding. What keeps them involved is the emotional intensity of the interaction itself, because it reassures them that they still have psychological control in the relationship. One of the most powerful shifts that can happen in a relationship with a narcissistic person is when emotional detachment starts to replace emotional chasing. Narcissists rely on what is often called narcissistic supply, which includes attention, emotional reactions, admiration, and even arguments. This supply feeds their sense of importance and control. When someone is deeply involved, arguing, explaining, defending themselves, we're trying to drag an apology out of them, the narcissist keeps getting that emotional energy. In many ways, the relationship becomes a system that revolves around their reactions and their talent for provoking responses. Detachment breaks that system. Emotional detachment does not mean becoming cold, cruel, or completely uncaring as a person. It means choosing not to pour your emotional energy into the narcissist's manipulative patterns. Instead of reacting with anger or desperation, you start to respond calmly, briefly, or sometimes not at all. The emotional intensity that once fed the whole pattern slowly fades. For a narcissist, this change can feel deeply unsettling. They are used to knowing exactly how to trigger you, whether it is guilt, fear, frustration, or your need for approval. They count on those reactions. When those reactions stop showing up, the usual script no longer works. Their favorite tools, like provoking you, blaming you, giving you the silent treatment, or being dismissive, stop getting the same results. Without that emotional feedback, the narcissist starts to feel a loss of influence. The person they once controlled emotionally now looks steady and far less reactive. This creates uncertainty and sometimes even anxiety, because the narcissist can sense that their ability to dominate the emotional space is slipping. Another powerful shift happens when steady, consistent boundaries enter the relationship. Narcissists are very used to testing limits. They often push, dismiss, or ignore other people's needs just to see how far they can go without any real consequences. If the other person keeps explaining, forgiving, or putting up with the behavior without changing how they respond, the narcissist learns that the boundary is not truly firm. Over time, this teaches them they can keep doing what they're doing and still avoid responsibility. Consistent boundaries break that learning. A boundary is not just a sentence like, "Please don't treat me this way." It becomes real only when it is followed by a change in your behavior. For example, if you calmly say that disrespectful conversations will no longer continue, and then you actually step away from those conversations when they happen, the pattern starts to shift. The narcissist runs into a limit that can't be moved with guilt, pressure, or manipulation. At first, narcissists usually react to boundaries by testing them even harder. They might get dismissive, sarcastic, or try to start an argument. Sometimes they even escalate their behavior to see if you'll back down on your own rule. This testing phase is common because they are trying to figure out if your boundary is real or just another request they can ignore. When the boundary stays steady and calm over time, it begins to shut down their usual strategies. They see that certain behaviors no longer give them the same access, attention, or control they once enjoyed. That consistency forces them to face a new reality in the relationship, where their actions finally bring real consequences. Silence and emotional calm can create a kind of psychological pressure that narcissists are not ready for. In many toxic patterns, narcissists depend on predictable reactions. When they provoke, criticize, or hurt someone, they expect the other person to answer with anger, begging, long explanations, or over trying to fix things. Those reactions give the narcissist a sense of control because they can steer the conversation, twist the story, or fire up the conflict to stay in charge of the interaction. When someone responds with silence or calm instead of emotional fireworks, that pattern suddenly breaks. Silence in this situation is not weak or passive. It is a clear choice not to join the emotional chaos the narcissist is trying to create. Instead of arguing or defending yourself, you step back, disengage, or respond in short, steady ways that do not feed the drama. For narcissists, this lack of reaction can feel confusing and deeply uncomfortable. They are used to knowing exactly which buttons to press. When those buttons stop working, they lose a key source of psychological comfort. The silence leaves them without the normal signals that tell them they still have control over you and the situation. Over time, this calm detachment creates pressure because the narcissist realizes their usual tactics are no. longer getting the reaction they want. The emotional stage they use to control becomes quiet, and the missing drama removes the spotlight that once revolved around them. That silence can force them to see that their behavior is no longer effective at keeping you hooked or under their influence. Self-respect quietly but powerfully shifts the balance in a relationship with a narcissistic person. When you start to value your own dignity, time, and emotional health, the pattern that once centered on pleasing or managing the narcissist begins to change. Narcissists often move toward people who are very empathetic, patient, and willing to give endless chances. Those qualities are strengths, but they can be misused when the narcissist learns that the other person will keep tolerating harmful behavior, hoping things will eventually get better. When self-respect becomes your guiding rule, you stop bargaining with your own worth. You no longer feel the need to constantly prove your feelings, explain your boundaries, or chase validation from someone who keeps dismissing you. Instead of asking again and again for basic respect, you start to see it as a minimum requirement for staying in the relationship at all. This interchange is often subtle at first, but it shifts the energy in every interaction. A narcissist is very sensitive to changes in power and attention. When you begin to carry yourself with quiet confidence and self-assurance, they notice that the grip they once had is slipping. The person who used to chase approval now looks far less dependent on it. You become more selective about what behavior you accept and more willing to walk away from situations that feel disrespectful. This change can unsettle the narcissist because their influence depended heavily on your need for their approval or for peace. When self-respect replaces that need, the narcissist starts to understand that keeping access to you might actually require changing how they behave. When their manipulation stops working, avoiding responsibility becomes much harder for them. In many relationships with narcissistic individuals, manipulation is the main way they escape being held accountable. They may deny what happened, twist the conversation, throw blame onto you, or distract from the real issue by starting new fights. These tactics work because they pull you into endless explanations, emotional arguments, and attempts to defend your reality. As long as you stay stuck in that loop, the narcissist never has to truly face what they did. Things begin to change when those manipulative moves stop getting the usual reaction. Instead of arguing about every twisted claim or trying to fix every accusation, you stay calm and refuse to enter the confusion. You acknowledge what's happening briefly or hold your boundary, but you don't follow the narcissist into the maze of blame shifting and emotional chaos. Without your full participation, their escape routes start closing. The narcissist can't easily change the subject or provoke a big emotional reaction that distracts from their behavior. When manipulation keeps failing, the focus quietly returns to the real issue, the harm that was caused. This doesn't automatically mean the narcissist suddenly feels deep empathy, but it does create a situation where they realize their normal defenses are no longer working. If their goal is to get back access, regain influence, or keep the relationship from falling apart, they may start to see that dodging responsibility is no longer getting them what they want. In that moment, the possibility of an apology sometimes shows up. Not always from deep understanding, but from the realization that taking responsibility is the only path left. The final piece you need to understand is this. W. When a narcissist does apologize, the reason behind that apology is often very different from what most people imagine. Most people link apologies with empathy, regret, and a real desire to repair the damage done. In healthy relationships, someone apologizes because they see the pain they caused and they genuinely want to make things right. With narcissistic personalities, though, apologies are often driven by something else, the fear of losing control or losing access to you. Narcissists focus strongly on maintaining influence. When their usual patterns stop working, when emotional reactions fade, boundaries stay strong, and you no longer chase their approval, the narcissist starts to feel that loss of control. The relationship is no longer running on their terms. The attention and emotional energy they once got so easily is now limited or completely gone. This shift can create real discomfort and even anxiety because it threatens their sense of importance. They may start to see that if nothing changes, you could pull away for good or move on with your life. At that point, an apology can show up as a strategy to reopen the door. You need to understand that this apology may not come from deep emotional insight. Often it appears because they see that their behavior is costing them something they value, your attention, your admiration, or their influence over you. In that moment, saying, "I'm sorry," becomes a tool to regain access, restore the relationship, or rebuild the pattern that once worked in their favor. In conclusion, getting a narcissist to apologize is not about convincing them with long speeches. It is about changing the emotional environment they depend on. Begging, pleading, or arguing almost never works because apologies threaten their fragile sense of self. What truly shifts the pattern is calm, detachment, steady boundaries, and unshakable self-respect. By refusing to feed their emotional supply, by stepping back instead of reacting, and by holding your dignity, you create a situation where the narcissist can no longer use manipulation to stay in control. Over time, that mix of detachment, consequences, and firmness often pushes them toward an apology, not always from pure remorse, but because their usual strategies simply stop working. The power of this approach lives in you taking back your emotional energy and setting up conditions where an apology becomes not just possible, but likely. It's not about forcing them to change. It's about building an environment where accountability is the only option left. In the end, your peace, your clarity, and your self-respect are what truly drive the transformation.